Hi, my name is Cody Hanner. I'm the host of the podcast, The Homestead Education, and creator of Homestead Science, the homeschool curriculum. I'm here today to talk to you about creating a local food system. So we need a local food system because, as we all realized, 3 years ago, that there is a break in our food system. It's weak and it's unstable, and we just can't rely on it. So when everybody decided to start homesteading 3 years ago, which there was many of us that started before that, but for those of us that really decided that 3 years ago was the year, you were joining me while we were making taco salad for dinner. I figured, what better time to talk about building a local food system than when we're actually cooking in our own kitchen. So when everyone decided to become homesteaders or to take their homesteading to a whole nother level, everybody thought that they were going to become a self-sufficient island, meaning that they had no outside help. And what we quickly found out was that that's really a utopian concept. But like I said before, our supply chain is unstable. We're dealing with a monopoly in the meat system, and we're dealing with a lot of foods that are illegal. And that might sound crazy to some of you. Like, how can we say that our food is illegal? But it's illegal to sell certain foods. It's illegal to buy certain foods, produce certain foods. And these aren't foods that are crazy. Like, these aren't foods full of chemicals. These aren't foods that are created in labs. The foods that are illegal are real, raw, homemade foods. Raw milk is illegal in so many states. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's illegal probably in about a quarter of the states in the United States. It is completely illegal in Canada. In the states that it is legal, a lot of them have rules that it can only be for pet milk, or you can only have raw goat milk, or that the states that do allow it, they have some laws and regulations that are actually similar to what the laws and regulations for a commercial dairy would be. So, I'm kind of on board with those. But it's illegal to have meat processed at a custom meat processor, like the small ones that are in towns, not the big ones that have like USDA inspectors. It's actually, it's illegal to have that meat processed and then sell it to your friends and neighbors. So there's also, like, I can't can a bunch of jelly and sell it to my neighbors without permits. And so it's really crazy to me that the food that fed us for thousands of years is now considered illegal. But the lab created commercial foods that are now being created and sold in stores and sold by the monopolies, those are the ones that are legal. So I think that tells you a lot. But anyways, this utopian concept that we can create everything has made it where a lot of people realized they couldn't do everything, and led them to maybe think that homesteading wasn't right for them. And really the answer to that is creating a local food system. So the reason I think that a local food system came really easy to me was, growing up, my dad was an avid hunter. I'm not talking like he went every weekend. I'm talking like he went every day. And with that, one of the reasons he went every day was we had an invasive pig and like feral swine issue in Northern California where we lived. And so a lot of his hunting was through depredation permits, where he would get paid by vineyards and cattle ranchers and stuff to come in and actually reduce the swine population because they were so invasive and so damaging. They're really aggressive too. So he would literally hunt every day, and that created a lot of meat. So with that meat, he, donated it to food banks. And, I was thinking about this beforehand, and I was like, he must have donated it before it became illegal to have non-USDA processed meat sold or donated, which, because now it's illegal. You have to have it processed at a USDA facility to donate to like a food bank or a like to a like senior facility or something like that. So I was like, well, so it must be because it wasn't illegal then. But honestly, now that I think about it, I think our small town just didn't care, which I think is great. But of course, that was back in the 80s. So in 90s, maybe early 2000s. So what I found with that is it was just normal to me that when you have extra meat, you share it. That was us dropping it off at friends' houses. That was friends showing up at our house with meat. Fish, they'd go fishing, they'd have more than their family could eat, and they'd share. And that was just how we did it. We had big parties and barbecues where everybody would bring meat to share. And that was, you know, the basis of my childhood when it came to our local food system. Now, when it came to our vegetables and other groceries, we definitely, we bought those from the grocery store, and we had gardens, but we definitely weren't supplying all of our food supply from the gardens. They were just for our hobby, for some extra tomatoes in the springtime, or summertime, I guess. So we didn't really preserve a lot of foods. We preserved a lot of meat because that's what we had a majority on. We did a lot of jerky. My dad was always making jerky. We did it sun-dried. We didn't do it in an oven or a dehydrator. And that was my favorite jerky. And honestly, I haven't been able to recreate it because I live in North Idaho. And so trying to do sun-dried jerky the way we did in California just doesn't work. But I'm still working on mastering it. I'm not going to give up because my dad passed away several years ago. And so to be able to have that jerky again, I have to figure it out myself. Anyways, when my husband and I and our family decided to really begin creating our local food system, it was a little before COVID, but like with a lot of other people, COVID definitely expedited that. Our local food system went into high speed on March 14th, 2020, just like everyone else. Luckily, we already had our homestead fully in place. We were milking our cow, we had freezers full of meat, but we came home from the hospital with our infant son who had just gotten out of the NICU, and we didn't want to be going to the grocery store just like everyone else, nor was there anything at the grocery store. So we started working with our friends and neighbors to see what we all could provide each other. Now, like I said, we had full freezers. We had neighbors with whole barns full of hay and grain that they couldn't sell because people weren't leaving their houses. So that was where ours really started. We needed to be able to feed our animals, and the feed stores were shut down. And even though we have pastures to graze some of our animals, that didn't really work for our pigs and our chickens, not as well as we would have liked, especially in March. During that year, I did begin a chicken garden that was a lot of grains that my chickens were able to free range on. So that was really awesome. And I'm not talking like my meat birds, I'm talking just my laying hens. My chicken garden, it had sunflowers, it had sorghum, corn, spinach, lettuce, there's all sorts of things that they could eat. The grains, while the grains were growing, and then when the grains grew and were dried out, then they had something else to eat. So that was really awesome. But I'm talking March when I needed grain for my pigs and I couldn't go to the feed store. So we got to talking to our neighbors, and we had neighbors that were selling grain. And we were able to buy and trade that grain, or buy the grain and or trade using the meat and milk that we had. And that was our biggest catalyst, or our biggest jump towards our local food system. My husband began working for those farmers, doing all of their heavy equipment, especially after they lost one of their family members to COVID. And in trade for that, we get 20 tons of hay a year. This has been going on for the last 3 years now. When there was food shortages in our county, we began donating pork to our local food banks. Now, we did have to have it processed USDA, and that was really hard. So then we started just donating like half and quarter hogs that were processed from our custom meat. We couldn't do it through the food bank, so we would call local churches and see who needed it the most. Knowing that, our local food bank got us into a rotation where any extra milk products, cheese, yogurt, even straight milk, that was donated to the food bank and wasn't going to be picked up by people in time, they brought and put directly into our walk-in cooler, unloaded it and everything for us, so that we had milk to feed our pigs, knowing that we were going to take that meat and turn around and donate it back to our community. This was a huge piece in getting to know people, talking to people, and like I said, really creating this local food system. So now, we have so much pork at this point that we even use it for trading for services, trading for bookkeeping, trading for even my podcast editing for a while. I mean, when you have something that you can trade like that, I was able to use my pork, and my podcast editor was able to use her skills. It was a really amazing system that we were able to create. Now, with our vegetables, we grow a lot of those ourselves. We buy those and trade for them in our community and a neighboring community that grows a lot of orchard fruits like apples and peaches. And with that, we're able to, have our juice, have our fruit, have our applesauce. Right now, while I'm talking to you guys, I'm actually cutting up peppers from my own garden. I got all the compost from my garden from a neighbor who needed some tractor work done. My husband did the tractor work. We got all the compost. It's been a wonderful trade-off like that. Another one is, instead of buying our flour from the grocery store, we have found local grain mills that grow and process their flour, and we either buy it from them or, again, trade with for product. This has really turned into a large portion of our foods coming from other areas. We have members of the community that do a lot of canning. They'll can, and anything that they have that's not enough to do a whole nother batch of canning, they bring to our family. And that system just continues to go like that. The way to put this into action, this is a very community-oriented activity. So you need to be able to go to your local church, or, make friends with someone that's involved in farming somehow. Because you don't have to be a farmer to have a local food system, because you can trade your skills as well. But you start working with your community to find out who has what. Once you have figured out who has what, so the first thing you want to do is you want to make a list of the 10 things that you use the most in your house. For us, that would be our meats. So we'd start looking at pork, beef, and chicken. Those are the 3 main things. Of course, we also eat a lot of venison and elk, turkey, things like that we can hunt for. That's another one, because if you can hunt, even if you don't have the land, a lot of times if you're trading with your friends and neighbors, they'll have land that you can hunt, where you're having a better chance of getting things than you would if you were hunting on public land. So another thing that we would consider is like our garlic and onions. We use a lot of that in our house. Flour, milk, butter, cheeses, those types of items.
We use a lot of butter.
And then we would start going down the list and deciding where we could source those things locally. Now, even when you're creating a local food system, I talk a lot about trading or bartering your skills. sometimes that simply just means buying these products from local farmers, smaller stores, and when you buy from the smaller stores, buy the items that they source from local farmers. And I believe the actual definition of local is 100 miles as the crow flies. I mean, that can really stretch you a long way. And there's no rule. There's nobody out there saying you don't have a local food system if you bought that 110 miles away. You can easily, work with a neighbor. Like, we just got 200 pounds of potatoes because a farm in the next state over was selling a bunch of potatoes for next to nothing. Somebody from our community went and was buying whole truckloads and selling them for, I think, $5 a piece. I mean, $5 per 50-pound sack. So we were still buying the product. We were networking with our community, but we weren't networking outside of our community. And we were able to get 200 pounds of potatoes to put in our root cellar. I mean, that is a game changer for our family going into winter. So, starting with the meat. We're the pork producer locally. With that, we don't use as much beef. We do raise a couple beef steers every year or two, but like one of the things we run out of first is hamburger. I think that's just kind of natural. We have a lot of kids, we're eating hamburger, we're eating tacos, we're doing spaghetti, all those types of things that are like kid-friendly foods. I found that there was just no way that we were gonna be able to keep up with our hamburger intake just using beef, whether that's beef that we produce ourselves or beef that we source from our neighbors. Beef's a little bit more expensive, so I didn't want to be buying it from the store, and I didn't want to necessarily be even buying from our neighbors because of the price. So I started doing plain ground pork. We use plain ground pork for many of our tacos, our hamburgers, spaghetti. I just season it up the way I want it, and you honestly wouldn't know the difference. And sometimes I think it tastes better because it's it's more moist, it's a little lighter. I enjoy it. So that works for us when we don't have burger, and we save our burger for when we're having barbecued cheeseburgers or having somebody over for dinner that we're barbecuing or something, and that's when we use our beef. Now, like I mentioned with our beef, we actually don't raise regular old beef cows. We take our dairy girls to the neighbors to be bred by their beef bull every year. And then we're able to get a steer or heifer every year that is half dairy, half beef. They grow out at about the same rate that that a beef cow would, or a beef steer would. And we don't have to be breeding and raising expensive beef animals. Then we're getting our milk every year from our cow. We're getting meat from her, and we're trading for our hay and our grain for both of those through pork, through traded services with our neighbors. So then the next thing we do is we look at the items we cannot source locally. Because there's just some things that it's almost impossible, like salt. What we end up doing is we buy most of our salt in bulk. Personally, we use Redmond's real salt. I know a lot of other people are using that because it's a sea salt that you don't have to worry about any contaminants with it. This isn't a commercial for Redmond's, but we are able to buy in bulk from them, both in 50-pound sacks, 10-pound sacks, and these smaller containers that I can just refill. There's a lot of other options for buying things in bulk that you can't source locally. When you're working with your fruits and vegetables that you want to source locally, again, just talk to your neighbors, see what they have extra. and preserve as much of that as you can, because then you have it for the whole year, even if it's just their extras in August. Same with eggs, same with milk and butter. A lot of dairies, if you're friends with them or if you're trading with them, they're going to give you or sell you milk for less than they'd be selling it to their regular customers if they're getting something in return. And you're able to turn around and use that perfectly good milk for making your creams, butters, cheeses, and that's the way that you can preserve that milk to last all year long.
Another one you could add. You can get a bunch of fresh berries and freeze them.
Another one that we do is we forage a lot of our berries, a lot of our herbs. We go out in the woods. It's something we get to do as a family. We get to hike, get our exercise, and we're able to get blackberries, raspberries, huckleberries that, again, that we freeze them, we make syrups to put in our juices or in our teas and lemonades. We love it. So these are all ways that you can use your local foods and you're not just having to eat exactly what you have in that moment. Now, a lot of people are like, okay, how do we make this work? One of the ways that we can make this work is just accepting that as Americans, we eat too much. And I'm not necessarily talking about too much junk food and stuff like that. I'm saying that, like, our meat portions, you don't need a giant, 16-ounce steak for a meal. A serving is like 4 ounces. You add that to a salad or a spaghetti or something else, and you're going to take that meat, it's just going to stretch a really long ways. Other things to consider are just changing how you eat and prepare different foods. One of them for us is like carrots. We've gotten carrots before. We've never really been big on eating carrots, like cooked carrots with meals. We normally just eat carrots raw in salads or snacks. But when I'm able to get 50-pound sacks of carrots, I'm definitely canning that. I serve it with our dinners, either on this, like just on the side. I put it into stews, I put it into soups. On the side, you can season it and make it savory. You can put like a strudel type thing on top and make it a sweeter dish. They're really versatile, and you just have to think about different ways that you can eat these foods. Everything doesn't have to be the same way you've always eaten. And actually, I came up with that one because when my husband was diagnosed with liver disease, which is really what began our Homestead journey about 7 years ago, where we wanted to begin growing all our own food and sourcing it as naturally or as locally as possible. He was the hardest one to switch to eating things that weren't part of his normal meal. The foods that weren't the processed foods that he'd kind of grown up on. And I really had to adjust our eating and try things one step at a time and smaller amounts for him to even get used to those foods and be willing to eat them. So it really is one step at a time when you're doing this. What we just really need to talk about right now is that as a society, we have become too reliant on systems. The food supply, the grocery store, the chain of command, or supply chain for being able to get even like toilet papers and paper towels and all of these things. Like, a lot of times we make our own ranch dressing, but today my husband was going to town. I knew that we had a lot to do. I asked him to pick up some ranch dressing. He actually came home and he goes, okay, apparently this week's catastrophe is that we are out of ranch dressing everywhere. He goes, I went to 2 stores and they were completely out of ranch dressing. So he bought all the stuff for us to make ranch dressing at home, which is fine. But it's something that we're constantly having to look at over the last 3 years. And I mean, you need to ask yourself, if everything were to shut down again tomorrow, would you be able to feed your family for even a month? And we have become so complacent from this reliant on systems that even after what happened 3 years ago, we're beginning to trust again. And I just don't think that we're in a place to be able to trust again. I think we need to be able to have full pantries, we need to have full freezers, We need to know where we can source all of our foods, because if everything were to shut down tomorrow, there's a lot of foods that you just wouldn't have access to. So, like your salts, make sure you're buying those in bulk. If you're ready to start building your local food system today, I would start working with social media, maybe start a local group where people can post the foods that they already have, and that they're willing to trade and barter for. Consider what things you have to trade and barter for. Think of 2 to 3 things that you could increase with what you're raising or growing, or hours that you have in your day to provide a service. Also, you can download my free guide in the show notes here on how to start your local food system. So I'm recording this on 9/14, September 14th. This week, I have seen more things on social media about We Miss the America on 9/12, how patriotic everybody was, how there for their country everybody was. But I'm gonna say right now, I miss the homesteaders that we all became on March 14th, 2020.